Don't know how to convince them that they are supposed to care about other people.
The really nefarious part about all this is that men think that they're being empathetic because they tell these stories in their mind about how they get to rescue a damsel in distress, and they think that is empathy, but really they're just telling a story about how they get to be a hero.
Trying to convince them that they're supposed to care about other people as like a core value feels like trying to convince a fish that it is swimming in water.
Everything for men is framed through the lens of being a hero. Every story that they've heard, every movie that they've watched, they've seen men upheld as these hero figures, and inside they want to be that hero because that is the story that they've been told. And in that context, they don't have empathy for the sake of the person that they're rescuing. They care about the person in trouble because it will give them an opportunity to be a hero, and it's really about them.
I think for a lot of men, they would be engaged in a calculation of what consequences will come out of different choices that I might make. What consequences for me will come out of different choices that I might make in this scenario.
Men are willing to make extreme sacrifices if they get to play the hero role in the story. So they'll work 80-hour weeks and they'll tell themselves this story that they're sacrificing themselves for their family, or they will join the military, join the police force or something because they get to be a hero. And they think that self-sacrifice means that they are being empathetic, because if I didn't care about these people, I would not sacrifice myself working or risking my life.
I think in the context of romantic relationships, what this manifests as is men treating happiness within the relationship as sort of a zero-sum game where they need to take as much as they can get and hold tightly to that. In all my time of trying to explain this to men, the closest they can usually come is to conceive of it transactional.
I don't think that men care that much about their own happiness. I think they care about their status. And by adopting these rules of being a hero, a rescuer, a provider, it affirms their gender for them, because patriarchy has said in order for you to be a true man, you have to be a provider, you have to be a protector, you have to be the hero of the story. The problem is none of that actually requires empathy, because a hero can storm the castle and defeat the dragon without ever considering what is this princess's life actually like? What is it that she actually wants? What is she actually personally struggling with? The hero gets to decide for the princess what she needs. So it becomes a role that you play at someone instead of interacting with them, instead of learning what's going on inside of them.
Like, okay, so if I give the performance of caring about other people, then in return, I get like positive feedback in exchange for that performance.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Everything about masculinity and manhood in our society is performative. It is just a performance that men do, but they don't perform for the men in their lives. Men perform for other men, but more importantly, men perform for patriarchy because they've been promised a certain status by patriarchy if they can just perform their gender good enough. Now, the question that Hope Pedler was asking was, if you are a man that has empathy, that genuinely experiences empathy in the world, how did you cultivate that? Now, I am not a man anymore, but I did live most of my life under that conditioning. I still understand it. I've done a lot of unpacking of it. In my opinion, the number one reason why men don't actually experience genuine empathy is because they are too wrapped up in trying to maintain their gender. Men live their entire lives trying to prove their manhood and hold on to it desperately. Manhood is not something that is guaranteed in our society. It's something that any other man could strip away from you if you don't perform your gender correctly. And it leaves men in this place where they obsess about this role that they're trying to play in society. And they spend their entire lives just trying to prove that they are a man. And that just doesn't leave any space. There's no room there to consider other people's experiences and what they're going through. In my opinion, the only way that you're going to be able to create space for empathy inside of yourself is that you accept your version of masculinity, that you don't have to prove it, that it is yours because it is yours because it is yours, and you can stand in your masculinity, or you leave masculinity behind like I did. Living this game where you constantly have to try to prove and hold on to your manhood will cheat you of the full human experience, where you will not have space in your life to experience the beauty and the pain that comes with empathy. Being secure in your masculinity is not the only thing that you have to do. I think it is a starting point. After that, I think it really comes down to media consumption. I think that's a huge contributing factor. Read books, watch movies, watch shows, listen to music, by women, for women. Immerse yourself in the female experience. What is it actually like to be a woman in our society? Get curious. Curiosity is a huge part of empathy. And men just don't do that. Women do. Women have been consuming media about men, by men for their entire lives. And in that, they're able to have a certain level of empathy and a certain level of understanding of what it's like to be a man, because that story's been told so many times. They've seen and experienced the inner workings of men through media consumption their entire lives, and men haven't. But you can change that. You can start consuming media content that is written by women and for women as a way to be curious and as a way to cultivate empathy. Okay, but this is actually part of the problem, not part of the solution, because that child is a projection of yourself. You see yourself in them. They carry your DNA, and you're not empathizing with them as an autonomous human being that makes their own decisions and they're very different than you. You're empathizing with them as you see yourself in that child. And what often happens with men is that as those children grow into adults and become autonomous human beings that make their own decisions and become different than their dad, the dad loses connection and intimacy with them because they are no longer a representation of him. They can no longer live vicariously through these children. They can no longer empathize with themselves in that child. This full human being starts becoming their own person, and the father doesn't know how to relate to them anymore. If you can't have empathy for somebody who is different than you, somebody who doesn't carry your DNA, someone who you can't see yourself in them, they get to be an entirely different person who makes entirely different decisions. If you can't put yourself in their shoes, and you can't on a deep emotional level understand what it must be like to go through what this person is going through, then you haven't actually cultivated empathy at all. The biggest crisis that men seem to be facing in our society right now is male loneliness. And the biggest crisis that women seem to be facing, besides SA and murder and dismemberment and cannibalism and trafficking and besides those things, is that, they do all the work, all the mental labor, all the household labor, all the childhood labor. So men have to struggle with hard feelings, and women struggle with literally everything else. But so much of masculinity has been built in our society around men having a woman. And men aren't allowed to be true men if they don't have a woman, if they aren't in a romantic relationship. And I think if we look on a deeper, kind of darker side of that, men need to dominate someone or something in order to be a true man. That is the gendered script that has been written by patriarchy for men. But men cannot comprehend why a woman would want to be alone, because so much of their identity and their gender is wrapped up with having a woman, being in a romantic relationship with someone. It is near impossible for a man to conceive why a woman would not want that, because they would never, ever, ever choose that. Now, obviously, there's exceptions to that, and there are men who break free of that. But there is a great reckoning that is happening in our country and in countries like South Korea, where women are realizing their lives are better without men. And the more that you can decenter men in your life, the happier and more fulfilling of a life you can have. And that is creating a crisis for men who have built their entire identity around having a woman, and now they are suffering with male loneliness. And instead of becoming the type of person that a woman would want to partner with, someone who actually adds something to her life that makes her life more vibrant, more meaningful, someone who is able to help her carry the weight of life instead of adding weight to her life, men just blame women. But men need women in a way that women don't need men because of the way that gender scripts have been written. Men need women in order to feel secure in their own gender. Women don't need that. Which means ultimately men need to rethink manhood, because this isn't going to work. Like, with the way that society is going and what women need in order to feel safe and secure and have vibrant, life-giving lives, this isn't going to work. Men have to rethink masculinity, and most aren't willing to do that. Men don't understand patriarchy because they don't need to understand patriarchy. Men are not agitated by patriarchy. They don't have a pebble in their shoe as they're hiking, so to speak, and women do. Women understand what's going on because it is agitating to them and it draws their attention. Men are the chosen darlings of patriarchy. Yes, patriarchy hurts men too, but if you think about an abusive household where there's one child who's the golden child who always gets treated well in an abusive environment, that child is going to be messed up on a level, but when they look around at their siblings who are being treated worse, they're like, I have it pretty easy, actually. This isn't so bad. And it's not until they're adults and in therapy that they're going to realize just how much that fucked them up. One of the really interesting and eye-opening things that I heard somebody talk about once is that patriarchy is not the rule of men over society, it's the rule of fathers. There are a few men who've been promoted to this position of father where they get to rule over everyone, and it's very hierarchical. Why is it patriarchal and then hierarchical? Why are they anyway, sorry, totally distracted. Okay, refocus. Patriarchy hurts men, hurts women. Men are the chosen darlings of patriarchy. They're promised that someday they will get the father position and they will have rule over everyone else. But in the meantime, they need to practice that by practicing dominance and dominating someone or something, work, home, church, who knows. But men are more willing to play these games and to follow the rules of patriarchy because they are given these promises. Even as it's actively harming them, they're willing to play the game because they're promised an inheritance from patriarchy. And in doing that, they essentially become class traitors because patriarchy is also hurting them, and patriarchy is ruled by the top tier 1% of men. When did I start actually cultivating empathy? Man, that's such a hard question. I grew up in deep in evangelical Christianity, so I had this sense of duty and obligation to save the entire world. I had a hero mindset. I was going to drop out of high school and bike across the U.S., traveling and sharing the gospel. I don't know why I thought I was qualified for that. I almost did that and I had to be talked out of it. And I left the faith for a little while in my 20s and then came back hardcore, became a full-time minister. Like, all of those things sound like I have empathy, like I care about other people, but really I wanted to have a purposeful life. I wanted people to remember me. It really was about my legacy. It was about me. It was being remembered. It was about how people perceive me. I think the biggest turning point for me was my divorce. When my ex initiated the divorce, I had to confront my bullshit in a way that I never had before. And I had this moment where my eyes were open to my own bullshit. It felt like there was a scroll unrolling in front of me, and I saw my life through an entirely new lens, and I could see my shit for the first time. And there was something tremendously humbling about that. that, I had to give up on this idea of being a super Christian that people would write biographies about someday. I had to give up on this idea that my community upheld me as like a model Christian. I had to let go of the hero concept of myself and realize I'm just another person. And I think that was the moment where I gave myself space for empathy. Because when you see yourself as the hero and you're trying to like develop a legacy, develop a reputation, manage people's perception of you, there isn't space for you to have true empathy. On top of that, the idea of love that I inherited from Christianity was that love means you make sure the other person gets it right. So everything in your life is filtered through this idea of, are you making the correct choice, the accurate choice, the most moral choice, the most biblical choice? And I'm being taught and indoctrinated to judge other people's choices and filter through this like evaluation. Like I'm evaluating their behaviors and their choices and trying to determine if they're right or wrong. And there's no place for empathy in any of that. But that's what I'm taught love looks like. I need to make sure you're making the right choice. In other words, I need to judge your choices and determine if they're good or bad so that I can save you from going to hell, basically. But there's no empathy in that. There's no trying to understand, trying to put yourself in their shoes and feel and experience what life is like for them. So unfortunately for me, the single most influential moment that allowed more space for empathy in me was when I hit rock bottom during the divorce.
Look at this.
Oh, perfect. Oh my God.
Isn't it great?
Chris.
I know, it's my dream.
I have goosebumps everywhere.
I mean, I don't mind being insufferable. That's fine. My encouragement to you would be to watch movies that are written by women, even if they center men. Because women have been doing that in their entire lives. All of the media that was available to women in my generation was written by men for men. Not all of it, but 90%, right? So women have grown up watching, consuming media that's written by men for men. Even if it has female characters in it, those female characters are written by men and they are written for the male gaze, right? So now we could flip that. And now you have an opportunity to consume content that's written by women. It gives the female gaze perspective about men. So you could do the same thing that women have been doing our entire lives, right? You could watch movies written by women. You could listen to music written by women. You could watch shows written by women. And in doing that, you're going to see a different perspective of the world. Because a character written by a woman is going to have a different take than a character written by a man. So, for example, Brandon Sanderson is my favorite author right now. I have read almost all of his books, and he almost always has a strong female lead, a female protagonist, where the story actually centers women, which I love. But those women are written by a man, and a man isn't going to have a full understanding or perspective of what a woman goes through in real life. Now, Brandon Sanderson does do a good job of bringing in outside voices to help inform his themes. He talks a lot about mental health. He talks a lot about, a lot of different social dynamics, things that real human beings struggle with on a regular basis. And he's not relying entirely on his own perspective to do that. He is getting outside voices, but he is still the main author. And I think it would be better now, maybe not better. I think it would also be good for me to be reading books that are written by women, where it is the woman's writing style, it's her perspective. Everything is going to come out in that. And that's the work that I'm doing right now. I am working to decenter men, which includes how I consume media content, listening to music written by women, watching shows and movies written by women, reading books written by women. It's just going to give me a different view of the world. I love it. Give me 14 of them right now. I don't care what's in it. Like this is where it is. Because yeah, you're right. We do have like this natural defense that rises up inside of us and we're like, oh, I'm not one of those. Like, I'm a good one. But it takes awareness and it takes humility to go to the second part when you're like, yeah, but I know that I still carry programming, or like, I know this is still something that I'm going to have to face. And that last bit there where it cut off, it says, it's hard to know where my place is in all of this. But I think you're exactly where you need to be, where you're open and you're considering like, okay, how do I actually view women? What is going on inside my body, inside my mind? How have I been trained and programmed to view women a certain way? How have I been trained and programmed to view me, myself, my own masculinity, or my own femininity? Or like, what is my relationship to both my masculinity and my femininity? Like, those are the type of curious questions that take us in the right direction. And the more curious we can be, and the more we stay open to seeing things that might be a little bit uncomfortable, that's the work right there. Like, I'm so excited. This is like really encouraging for me to see this comment.